America's election headquarters, and we're talking about the primary day in Indiana. Senator Ted Cruz holds a campaign event in Evansville, and this comes on the heels of a dramatic encounter yesterday. Did you see this one? Senator Cruz tangled with some Donald Trump supporters. Take a listen.
Do you know on the wall that Donald told the New York Times editorial board he's not going to build a wall and he's not going to deport anyone?
You're lying. Once again, lying Ted!
Well, sir, you know, actually, civilized people don't just scream and yell at each other. I'm not yelling at you.
I'm not yelling at everybody.
Do you know that Donald's words were caught on tape? The New York Times recorded the whole thing, publicly reported. That's a total lie made up by Donald Trump's campaign.
Lying Ted.
This video just keeps going on and on and on, and these men won't give up. Joining us now to talk about it, Jonah Goldberg, a senior editor at National Review and a Fox News contributor, and Philip Bump, a writer for the Washington Post politics blog called The Fix. Phil, let's start with you. What was going on here?
I mean, Ted Cruz, God bless him, he went out and he saw some potential voters and he decided to engage them in a conversation. It went poorly. I think that one of the things that we've seen over and over again from Donald Trump supporters is they are very, very supportive of Donald Trump. It is very hard to dissuade them. If you look at exit polls, people who support Donald Trump, people who made up their minds well before the election are more likely to be Donald Trump voters because people make up their minds for Donald Trump and they stick with it. And I think we saw some of that. Ted Cruz tried to reason with him. He said, well, this happened and that happened. And the guy said, you're lying, Ted. And he repeated what Donald Trump had said. And that's why Donald Trump is doing well.
I mean, Ted Cruz didn't seem like he got too ticked off or anything about it. But, Jonah, is that a good idea to go in and have that kind of debate with voters?
Yeah, look, I guess I just completely disagree with Phil. I thought it was fairly admirable. I agree with him entirely that this lunkhead that Cruz was talking to was utterly unpersuadable. Right. But he wasn't the guy he was trying to persuade. It's like when I go around debating left-wingers on college campuses, I'm not expecting that I'm going to convince the left-winger I'm debating that I'm right and he's wrong about everything. You're trying to persuade the audience. And what Ted Cruz was doing was sending a signal, a viral thing that went very viral. That was part of the goal. To people who are wavering or on the fence or have only heard Trump's side of things to say, hey, look, there's actually reasonable arguments against this and you're being sold a bill of goods. Do I think it's going to win Indiana for him? No. But I thought it was worth trying.
So, Philip, then how did he do? You know, we have the Harvard-educated, Ivy League guy, you know, up against Joe the plumber. Who came out on top in this one?
No, I think Jonah's absolutely right. I mean, I certainly would not say that this was a giant mistake for Ted Cruz. He definitely got some headlines. I mean, what we just saw was Ted Cruz making an argument against Donald Trump on national news because he went out and spoke with these folks. But I think we also saw why Ted Cruz is having such a challenge over the long term, which is that his base of support, we've seen his base of support start to waver. Gallup polls show that his favorability numbers are dropping ever since Donald Trump appeared. Once Donald Trump won New York, it seemed as though he was the go-to nominee. Ted Cruz's numbers are suffering as a result of that, and I think that's the problem.
Let's bring back in Jonah here. Let's talk about that one a little bit, because Indiana was supposed to be Ted Cruz's firewall. So, Jonah, what happened?
Here, I think Phil is absolutely right. The momentum around Trump, particularly after the 5-for-5 win on the East Coast, just sort of changed the narrative and made people think that Trump is inevitable, and that becomes self-fulfilling prophecy in a lot of ways. I do think that if the Indiana primary had been, say, right after the Wisconsin primary, this might be a completely different race because the momentum was all on Ted Cruz's side, but the East Coast stuff just completely killed Cruz's momentum, and now it doesn't look great for Ted Cruz. If he wins here, he stays alive to fight another day, but even that is an uphill climb.
Ted Cruz has had a lot of good assets going for him in the state of Indiana. He's had Carly there, Governor Mike Pence. It's a fairly conservative state, and then a whole bunch of ads. We were talking about this with Brett Baer yesterday. A whole bunch of ads that have run against Donald Trump, and I'm just wondering why that wasn't enough to help save him. Just the momentum alone, Philip?
Well, I think it's pretty early to say that he hasn't been saved. I mean, one of the things we've seen about Ted Cruz, we saw in Iowa, for example, we went into Iowa thinking Donald Trump had this thing locked up. He was ahead by 5 points in the polls, and Ted Cruz came back and surprised him. And he did that because he had a very good field operation. Donald Trump has had a lot of time to figure out how to do field, how to turn people out to the vote. I'm not convinced he's figured out how to do that. I think that there is still a chance Ted Cruz surprises us tonight. And if he does, I think, to Jonah's point, that does change things, and it does make people relook at this race. Do I think Ted Cruz is going to win? No, I don't. And I think that he's not going to win because Donald Trump has all this momentum coming out of those big wins. But I think that we're giving him short shrift if we say there's no chance whatsoever.
Yeah, certainly. Jonah, if Ted Cruz does not succeed in winning in Indiana today, how much of a margin does he need that it still is keeping his supporters and the dollars flowing in and keeping him a somewhat strong candidate?
Well, if it's a muddle, right? If Trump wins by a few points and gets the majority of the delegates, but not all of them, I think Cruz is committed. He can go on through California. If it's a complete rout, that changes things. I think Cruz is committed. He's going to win a couple Western states before California. That could help him, but it would help him a lot more if he won Indiana. And I agree with Phil. He's the underdog here, but he's not ruled out.
Yeah, and so, Phil, they've got that deal. He's got that deal with John Kasich in New Mexico and Oregon that he's not going to campaign. So how do you see all that going down?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of states between now and June 7th. The three big states remaining are Indiana, New Jersey, and California. The latter two both vote in June. So, yeah, there's a lot of states, as Jonah pointed out. I mean, he's probably going to do decently in Nebraska. He should do well in South Dakota and Montana, fairly small states. But there is an opportunity for him to say there is still a bulwark against Donald Trump getting this nomination. Donald Trump will do well in other states. I mean, I think that saying these things over tonight, which Donald Trump is very enthusiastic to do for a lot of obvious reasons, I think that's a little premature.
All right. It is not over yet. Gentlemen, thank you. Jonah Goldberg and Philip also. Thank you both so much.